To work with compose files, just like second module, we are again shifting back to commands and files together. Now, just to make sure, let's see what is our present working directory. And as you can see, it is cc_docker. Just to remind you again, the cc docker has 8 directories in total. Each one of them stands for a separate module. Currently, we are working on S6 directory, so let's navigate there. And as you can see, there is a file called dockercompose.yaml. We will open this file. As we have studied in the theory portion, the compose file or the docker compose file is a YAML file which defines multiple objects like services, networks, and volumes. It is important to know that the default path for the compose file is always the present directory. Now, before we dig deeper into the docker compose file itself, it is important to know a few bits and pieces about the YAML files in general, where YAML stands for YAML Ain't Markup Language, and it has 3 basic data types. One is scalars like strings and numbers. Second is sequences, which are arrays or lists. And third are mappings, which are hashes or dictionaries which can be represented using a key value pair. The nesting of objects in a YAML file is determined by indentation. You can find more information about YAML files in the link given below. Now, since we have got that covered, let's dig deeper into this Docker Compose file. First of all, let's mention the version of Docker Compose that we are using, which is 3.3 in this case. Next, we have services. Services is the parent object for the containers that we are going to create. If we are going to create a multi-container application, we are supposed to use services. Let's create our first service called DB. It stands for database. Now, just like we have been creating containers using command, here too we need to mention a few parameters in terms of key value pairs. First of all, let's mention image. We are using MySQL 5.7 version, so we will write image as key and MySQL 5.7 as value. Then we have container name, which is again a key, and MySQL database is the value. Here the volumes act as the parent key and the volume name and mount path act as the children. Notice the indentation between all the fields. The key field or the parent field is services. Then we have further indentation for the services that we create, DB or database in this case. Let's go ahead and mention the restart policy. We will make the restart policy always so that we don't have to worry about the container being shut down. Environment stands for environment variables, just like Docker file. Here also, you can provide environment variables as key value pairs by indenting them a bit further. We are providing MySQL root password, MySQL database, MySQL user, and MySQL password for our WordPress instance that will be created in the next service. Here MySQL_database, which is going to be called WordPress, will be used as the name of the MySQL instance. Its root password will be word@press, and MySQL_user and MySQL password, the latter two keys, are used to allow WordPress to grant WordPress the access to the MySQL instance. Next, let's create another service in the same file called WordPress. Now look at the first key value pair, or look at the first field. It says depends on. It creates an interdependency relationship between containers, which means that DB container needs to be created first and WordPress will follow it later on. It is useful to create stateful applications like this one. Here, the WordPress service depends on DB service. And once that is clear, let us mention all the necessary fields for the WordPress container. We are going to use WordPress image. We will name the container wd_frontend. We are going to use the volume called WordPress_files, and we are mounting var www/html directory to this volume. We are also mapping ports 8000 to 80, and we are mentioning restart policy as always. Just like in previous service, here too we are using environment variables. The database host is db:3306. The WordPress DB user is WordPress, and password is abc@123. You can use any username or password you like, but for learning purpose, this will do. Finally, we will mention objects which are outside the boundaries of service or which are not the children of services field. Such objects are volumes and networks. We haven't created any user-defined network here, neither have we used any, so we don't need to declare them. But we definitely have used user-defined volumes, so we need to declare them here using volumes key, and the values will be WordPress_file and db_data. A quick revision of what we have done with this Docker Compose file. We have used two key fields, services and volumes, and have declared volumes which are used in the services. In the services field, we have created two services, database and WordPress, and we have mentioned container fields for both services, which include container name, container image, environment variables, and volume mount information. In next demo, we will execute this compose file and see how the application works.